We're joined by Mike Glenn from the Washington Times today, who's been covering the conflict in Ukraine. Mike, thanks for joining us today. What exactly is happening here? The U.S. is talking about sending more weapons to Ukraine.
Right. Well, the Ukrainians have been using the weapons we've been sending them pretty well, and I think there's a realization that this is not going to be over anytime soon, and they're going to continue to need support from us. Russia has sort of evolved its mission since their ambitions since the invasion. But now it looks like it's going to. There's a good chance it could drag on for quite a bit longer. Mm-hmm. So they're going to continue to need weapons. As I said, they've been using them quite well.
Mm-hmm. And there was some talk last week about how we might be seeing a new phase of the war begin, and there was talk of defensive versus offensive weapons that Ukraine might need. What's the difference there? What's changing?
Well, the most major change is the fact is really they're scaling. Russia's scaling down to their ambitions. They initially intended clearly to make a run on the government itself with their attempt to capture Kiev, and now their failure to accomplish that mission has really caused them to sort of pull back and try to consolidate around these areas in the Donbass region, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, where they have, which was their sort of base in Ukraine, to try to secure and then secure a land bridge to Crimea, which they've already been controlling for several years, for about 8 years now.
Do you think it's too early to kind of be talking about why they have to scale their goals back? What went wrong? They had
to scale their back because they failed. Because they realized that their approach, and that's another major development, is the appointment of an army general named Alexander Dvornikov to be the new sort of supreme commander of the invasion forces in Ukraine. They didn't have one previous, which is strange. I mean, there was no sort of comparable to General Schwarzkopf, in the Gulf War. They didn't have one. They had multiple axes of advance into Ukraine, each with its own sort of command element, with the overall picture being run from Moscow, which is a terrible way to do it.
A problem of centralized command here.
Right. Yeah. But this appointment of General Dvornikov is another sign of both Ukrainian resistance, how effective it's been, and Russian inability really to carry out the mission. Now, this is a very controversial figure, General Dvornikov. Like most of the senior Russian generals, he's had history in Syria, which he was accused of sort of indiscriminately bombing civilian centers and hospitals and schools there in Syria as a way to sort of get the army, get the anti-Assad forces to surrender or to sort of wear them down, which is what they've been doing in Ukraine thus far. Attacking civilian centers, attacking hospitals, tearing down schools, that sort of thing.
Sure. Now, you've been covering this from the Pentagon since the invasion began.
Since before the invasion.
Since before the invasion, that's correct, yeah. Do you think there's a point where NATO gets more involved in this, or do you think that window is passed? Obviously, we're sending weapons, but, deeper involvement.
NATO, I think if Putin decides to attack a NATO member, I think all bets are off. Then because that would trigger the NATO rules, Article 5 of the NATO agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. Barring that, I think if he goes to a level of some kind of mass casualty weapon, like some kind of NBC type attack, which they have done in Syria, I think anything less than that, I would be surprised if we'll do more than continue to support Ukraine militarily. We may increase the the level of support to the military, instead of mainly focusing on defensive weapons, start providing them with some offensive weapons, allowing them to sort of take the fight to the enemy.
Sure. And what does that really mean, offensive versus defensive weapons?
Yeah, defensive weapon is the sort of the anti-tank missiles they're using to so effectively take out the tanks. Those are essentially a defensive weapon, although they can be used in they're essentially defensive. Offensive weapon is like tanks, artillery, these kind of larger type weapons that will allow you
offensive actions,
engage and actually sort of move through your opposing force. So like I said, tanks, artillery, attack helicopters, fighters. I know that's always been an issue of contention there. But I think I would not be I was at a meeting yesterday with the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and she says, like, sort of long range offensive weapons are not off the table. They are part of the discussion now. There haven't been yet, but they are part of the discussion.
Sure. And you mentioned earlier that this may become a long-term conflict. I know that things have kind of been simmering there since 2014 and the initial Russian invasion of Crimea. Do you think this could end up becoming like a frozen conflict like that did, or do you think it's going to be really this hot war continuing for a while now?
Big
question.
If they end up sort of being pushed back to this disputed Donbas region. Well, I mean, if you talk to Ukrainians, the Ukrainian officials, they say they're going to fight for every inch of their country. Period. That includes Crimea. That includes the disputed Donbas region. But it's been Russians have been in control of Crimea for 8 years. And they've been effectively in control of the Donbas for several years as well. I mean, if they get pushed back to the areas they've been in control for several years,
the Russians have been in control of.
Sort of going into status quo. It's kind of a Cold War kind of situation. But if they continue, Ukrainians say they are willing to fight for every inch of their country.
Sure. Well,
who knows?
Yeah, certainly. Well, Mike, really interesting as always. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sure. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.